Have you ever walked into a room, the same room your cat used to sleep in, and felt just for a second that they were still there? Not a memory, not wishful thinking, an actual sense of presence, so specific and so sudden that you turned around to look. Sure, it's easy to dismiss that, to tell yourself it's grief playing tricks, that you're seeing what you want to see, that this is what loss does to a mind that isn't ready to let go. But behind that feeling, there's something researchers have been studying quietly for years, and what they found doesn't explain it away. It does almost the opposite. It's one of the most specific and least understood aspects of what happens after a deep bond ends. And if you felt it and pushed it away because you were afraid of what it meant, you might have been dismissing the one thing that science is only now beginning to confirm. Stay with me for what I want to tell you near the end, because there's a question underneath all of this, one most people are afraid to ask out loud. And by the time we get there, you'll have something real to hold on to. Let's start with what's actually happening inside your brain when you lose a cat you loved. Point one, what your brain does with a bond. It isn't ready to release. Have you ever noticed that in the days after losing your cat, you still heard them? A sound from the other room that couldn't have been there. The particular weight of a presence near your feet as you fell asleep. Something in the corner of your eye that moved the way they used to move. Grief researchers call this a continuing bonds experience, and it is not a symptom of complicated grief or a sign that something has gone wrong in your mind. Studies published in journals of bereavement research and palliative care find that a significant majority of people who lose a deeply bonded companion, human or animal, report sensing their presence in the days, weeks, and sometimes months after the loss. Here's what most owners never realize about this. Your brain spent years building a neural model of your cat, not a memory, a predictive system, an active, running simulation of where they were likely to be, how they moved, what sounds they made, what it felt like when they were nearby. Neuroscientists call this a predictive processing framework. Your brain doesn't just record experience, it constantly anticipates it. To your brain, your cat wasn't just something you remembered, they were something your nervous system was continuously actively expecting. And that system doesn't switch off the moment they're gone. It keeps running, searching, anticipating, filling in the familiar shape of a presence that was woven into thousands of ordinary moments over years. That isn't your mind playing tricks. That's your mind doing exactly what it was built to do, holding on to a bond that was real, because to your nervous system it still is. Remember this, because what I'm going to tell you in the last point connects directly back to it. Point two, why this cat and why this feeling is different. Have you ever tried to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it why losing a cat feels different from other losses, and found that the words didn't quite get there? Research on human-animal attachment published in the journal Anthrozoos has documented something specific about the bond between a person and a deeply bonded cat. Unlike most human relationships, which carry history, expectation, complexity, and conflict, the bond with a cat is almost entirely made of presence. It exists in the physical, in proximity, in warmth, in the particular texture of a routine shared across thousands of ordinary days. What researchers in attachment neuroscience have found is that these sensory-based bonds, bonds built from touch, sound, warmth, movement, leave deeper imprints in the brain's predictive systems than bonds built primarily from language and cognition. Your cat never told you they loved you in words. They told you in every other possible way, every single day. And your nervous system recorded all of it. To your brain, losing your cat isn't the end of a chapter. It's the sudden absence of a sensory presence that your nervous system had spent years integrating as part of what safety feels like, part of what home feels like, part of what you feel like. And that's not grief that's out of proportion. That's grief that is exactly proportionate to a bond that was exactly that deep. Most owners never realize this. The size of the loss matches the size of what was there, and what was there was real in a way that science is only beginning to measure. If this is finally putting language to something you've been carrying quietly, that's exactly what this channel is built for. Hit like and subscribe. It helps other cat owners find videos like this one. And what I want to show you next is the part of this most people never let themselves reach, because it requires asking a question most of us are too afraid to ask. Point 3. What the research on continuing bonds actually shows. Have you ever found yourself talking to your cat after they were gone? Not out loud, maybe, but internally. A thought directed at them, a moment where you reported something to them out of habit, a split second where you reached for them before you remembered. Psychologist Dennis Klass, whose research on continuing bonds transformed how grief is understood clinically, found that maintaining an internal sense of connection with a lost loved one is not a sign of incomplete grief. It is, in the majority of cases, how people with healthy grief actually process loss. They don't sever the bond, they transform it. Studies specifically focused on pet loss, including research from the University of Hawaii and the Journal of Mental Health Counseling, have documented that people who allow themselves to maintain a continuing sense of connection with a lost pet report significantly lower rates of complicated grief and depression than those who attempt to suppress or immediately move past the bond. To your nervous system, the relationship doesn't end when the physical presence does. The neural pathways that hold that bond, the anticipation, the warmth, the sense of being accompanied, those remain. And researchers now understand that honoring them, rather than fighting them, is not avoidance. It's how the mind integrates a loss it was never designed to simply delete. That feeling of your cat's presence isn't you refusing to accept reality. It's your brain doing the only thing it knows how to do with a bond this deep. It keeps them close while it learns, slowly, how to carry them differently. Point 4. The question most people are afraid to ask, and what science leaves open. Remember at the beginning when I said there was a question underneath all of this, one most people are afraid to ask out loud. Here it is. Is what you're feeling real? Not neurologically real. Not real as a product of grief processing. Real in the way that would mean something beyond the mechanism. Real in the way that would mean your cat, the specific one, the one who slept at the exact same spot on your bed every night for 12 years, is somehow still present in a way that isn't fully explained by predictive processing and attachment neuroscience. Science does not answer this, and this is important. The absence of a scientific answer is not the same as a scientific answer of no. Researchers who study consciousness, including those at the University of Cambridge who authored the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness in 2012, have confirmed that non-human animals possess the neurological substrates that generate conscious experience. Your cat was conscious. Your cat had subjective experience. What happens to that experience is a question that neuroscience, physics, and philosophy have not resolved. Not because they've looked and found nothing, because the question sits at the edge of what current instruments can measure. What science does confirm is this: the bond was real, the love was real. The imprint it left in you is measurable and documented. And whether what you feel when you sense your cat's presence is entirely neurological, or whether it points to something beyond that, that is a question you are allowed to hold open. Most owners never give themselves permission to do that, to feel the presence and not immediately explain it away. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to decide what it means. You are allowed to simply receive it and let it be what it is. That's not wishful thinking. That's wisdom. So what if you haven't felt this? What if you lost your cat and there was no sense of presence? Just absence, sharp and complete, with nothing to fill it. That's not a failure of the bond. It's not evidence that what you had was less deep. Grief takes every shape it needs to take. Some people feel the presence immediately. Some feel it weeks later, in an unexpected moment. Some never experience it as presence. They experience it as weight, as quiet, as a change in how a room feels. All of it is the same thing, a nervous system learning to carry a love that didn't stop when it should have had somewhere to go. However, your grief is moving through you. That's the right way. There isn't another one. There's one more piece of this I haven't touched yet. We've talked about what happens in your brain after loss, what the research says about continuing bonds, and what science leaves open about presence and consciousness. But there's something that happens before the loss, something most cat owners are already feeling, often years before their cat actually goes, that has its own name, its own neuroscience, and its own way of being honored. That's the subject of the previous video in this series. And if any part of what we talked about today resonated, it's already waiting for you.